Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. Welcome to the Cameron Journal Newshour. Happy Monday, everyone. It's December the 15th, 2025. So exciting to talk with you this evening. We have some big headlines, some of them you've already heard of. We'll get to those. I have the latest updates on Rob Reiner pending. I also have a little story from the Providence Journal about the shooting at Brown University. Lots going on in the world, as we know. I want to make sure to mention if you want to sign up for the Saturday newsletter where we talk about all sorts of great stuff and you can have the latest of my stuff just emailed directly to you, cameronjournal.substack.com, or you can go to cameronjournal.com/newsletter. Sign up at either location, you'll get the newsletter. We're very excited for that. Thank you to all my Cameron Journal Plus subscribers. If you want to support this journalism, please head over to cameronjournal.com/subscribe, and we love you for joining us. All my social links are at cameronjournal.com as well. They're also on the Substack, so please make sure to check all of those things out. Programming note, this show is going to be the second to last show of the year. So next Monday, the 22nd, I'm going to do the News Hour. I have a bunch of meetings that day. I got to be up and working anyway. So that'll be the last show of the year. For the Living Joke, we will be doing a New Year's Eve show. That's my other podcast, The Living Joke. If you're watching this on YouTube, the content is there. My other show, we will be doing a New Year's Eve stream on December 31st, obviously. So that's really cool. It's gonna be a lot of fun. That's kind of a hangout stream, but this is gonna be second to last for the year, and then I'll be back on January 5th, I think is the first day. I'll try to do the news hour that day. The newsletter, similar situation. This one upcoming Saturday will be the last one for 2025. There won't be another newsletter after that because I am taking some time off. Ordinarily in this show, I will take off. I'll usually have a hiatus in the summer, and I'll take off most everything after December 10th. I didn't take a hiatus this summer, and because of other contracts and whatnot, I can't just stop at December 10th anymore. This is kind of my big chance to have a big break and just kind of unplug from everything and go from there. So so just programming note on that front. But let's dive right into the headlines. Let's begin with Rob Reiner and Brown University because it'll just be easier. So let me do this. And let me go here. So, as you may or may not have heard, Rob Reiner and his wife was found dead in their home last night. His son, Nick Reiner, 32, is being held now without bail. Earlier, I heard it was $4 million. Being held without bail on suspicion of murder after the bodies of the director, Rob Reiner, and his wife, Michelle, were found in their home. It says here that a son of celebrated Hollywood director Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner has been arrested on suspicion of murder in the deaths of his parents, the police said on Monday. The arrest on Sunday came the day after the father and son were seen arguing at a party at the home of comedian Conan O'Brien, according to a party attendee who recalled Rob Reiner telling his son that his behavior was inappropriate. The attendee, who asked not to be named to maintain relationships, did not speak of any of the Reiners at the party and added it was unclear what the argument was about. The son, Nick Reiner, 32, was arrested Sunday night and was being held in a jail in Los Angeles County, the police said. Jail records viewable online initially indicated the bail had been set at $4 million, but those records have since been modified. He was being held without bail, the police said. The police said the couple were found dead in their home in the upscale Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles on Sunday afternoon. Two people who were briefed on the case but not authorized to speak publicly said the couple had been stabbed to death. Obviously, if you have watched movies in the last 40 years, you've seen some of his work. It says here, Rob Reiner, 78, was a popular sitcom actor before directing a slate of beloved films, including This is Spinal Tap, When Harry Met Sally, and The Princess Bride. He went on to become a force in California and national democratic politics, championing gay marriage and other causes. Miss Reiner, 70, was a photographer and later a producer. Nick Reiner had spoken over the years about his struggles with drug abuse and bouts of homelessness beginning with his teenage years. He worked with his father on a movie, Being Charlie, that was loosely inspired by his early life. In part because of that history, the police focused almost immediately on Nick Reiner, according to a person who was briefed by authorities, and spoke on condition of anonymity because they didn't have the authority to speak publicly on the investigation. Booking records indicated that Nick Reiner was arrested Sunday night by Los Angeles police and formally booked shortly after 5 a.m. Monday. On Monday afternoon, a private security company was guarding the Reiner's property, whose entry and driveway gates were adorned with no trespassing signs. Some people have walked by, though neighbors have declined to talk about the case. Mr. Reiner's Hollywood career as an actor and director spanned decades, including an 8-year run on All in the Family, a 70s sitcom. More recently, Mr. Reiner cameos in television shows like New Girl and The Bear. The actor Sean Astin, speaking on behalf of SAG-AFTRA, called Mr. Reiner, quote, one of the most significant figures in the history of film and television. So yeah, very, very sad, sad moment. Obviously Rob Reiner was a bit of had attracted a lot of attention, both positive and negative, in regards to his political activism. Trump did post a rather interesting message about the death and everything on Twitter and Truth Social today, which some people called a little bit déclassé because he got into the whole Trump dream syndrome and made it about him. But a terrible loss. Certainly will be an interesting to see on the Oscars tribute death reel in 3 months. So I'm sure there will be an interesting trial, and this will be an ongoing story. This one's pretty well solved. Let's look at the one that's not, and that's what's happening at Brown University. So this weekend, I believe on Saturday, Friday night into Saturday morning, there was a shooting at Brown University in Providence. And there is some video, new footage has been released of the shooter, described as just kind of wearing all black. And there's the miscreant now. Grab him. And so yeah, there he goes. And it says here that in the 49th hour, this is from the Providence Journal, in the 49th hour after a mass shooting on Brown University's campus left 2 students dead and 9 students injured, the Providence police and the FBI released several new videos and photos showing the person of interest in the neighborhood surrounding Brown University hours before the shooting. The release comes after an initial different person of interest was taken into custody and was released at 12:30 a.m. Attorney General Peter Naranjo said that person has since been cleared. Additional information was revealed during a 5 p.m. press conference, including that officers recovered 9mm shell casings from the scene and that law enforcement believes that the school was specifically targeted. FBI Special Agent in Charge Ted Dox described the suspect as armed and dangerous. Forensics teams worked near Barris and Holly Hall, the scene of the shooting, and down Waterman Street collecting evidence. U.S. Marshals canvassed the area going door to door, looking for security camera footage that may have captured the person of interest, identified only as a male wearing all black leaving the scene. The 2 students killed have been identified by multiple sources as Ella Cook, the vice president of the Brown Republicans, and Mohammad Aziz Umarzakov, who wanted to be a neurosurgeon. Tributes for both have begun pouring in from officials. The Providence Journal is taking reader questions about the shooting and follow-up. You can submit them here, and we'll do our best to answer them. Follow along for live updates. The last update was just before we went on the air, and they're looking for interview anyone who was in those buildings. People are still going to the ice rink, so they don't want to be scared. And it says that the target of the university used a 9mm firearm, and did not indicate why the university was targeted. Perez said that law enforcement, or Providence Police Chief Oscar Perez said that law enforcement officials are investigating claims that the shooter yelled something during the shooting. He did not confirm those reports. It also says here that the IRS is somehow involved. The IRS is involved in the investigation somehow, but no one's not quite sure how. Sort of things. There's multiple things happening, but no suspect yet. Just these pictures. So, there's multiple agencies that are aiding with the investigation, and obviously Providence police are in charge. There's of course now a $50,000 reward. And there's obviously tributes and flowers being placed and all this sort of thing. President Trump did say, that's moving along now. He said, we're going to see what happens. Hopefully they're going to capture this animal. Trump said the FBI has done a very good job catching the individuals believed to be responsible for other recent shootings like the murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. They've done it in pretty much record time, he said. Trump also downplayed the FBI's involvement in the investigation, suggesting that the difficulty was with charging a suspect was Brown's fault. Quote, you'd really have to ask the school a little bit more about that because there was because this was a school problem, he said. They had their own guards, they had their own police. You'd have to ask that question to the school, not to the FBI. We came in after the fact. So that's all we know on that for now. But those are kind of the big stories of the day. Before I dive into the next one, I also want to mention Anthony Geary from General Hospital also died today. If you're into daytime television and soaps, he played Luke on General Hospital, which was really cool, and just yeah, um, just a really great actor. Was in our living rooms for a long time. So um it's yeah, so he passed on today, which was really tough thing. And I just it's just amazing how you know, you miss never met this guy obviously, but um he was a part of our lives, sort of thing. Because he was in our living rooms every day, playing this beloved character for decades at a time. So, um, our hearts with that family as well. As a side note, I can't wait to hear Conan talk about the fact that the Rob Reiner stuff started at his party. I will be set for the podcast on that sort of thing. So, um, but moving right along, we're going to get right into an interesting topic of the day, and that is I'm going to change the graphic right now, and we're going to go with what's wrong with men. I think because I have an interesting set of stories about that, and longtime listeners will know that I've written about men and manhood since the earliest days of my career. I was a contributor to the Goodman Project. I've interviewed Paul Elam. In fact, that interview is going to go back up here soon because I found it. It was kind of lost media for a little bit, but it was still on the website, and I found it. I'm going to publicize it more widely. Um, and, uh, and so I have a couple stories on this, and I want to kind of dig in this because a lot of stuff are downstream of these issues, and there's a new story out from Compact Mag today talking about how white millennial men have been left behind in cultural institutions. But this isn't just a millennial problem, or even just a man problem, or even just a white man problem, or even just a man problem. This is kind of a whole we're leaving half a society behind sort of thing. And I already had a story about this, and then the Compact Mag thing came out today, and everyone's talking about it. So I want to start with Brad Wilcox here, though, because he says, my female students at the University of Virginia are worried about the state of the opposite sex. The women who take my sociology of family class tell of brothers living in their parents' basements, boyfriends hooked on pornography, and male peers who don't pull their weight in group projects. Most troublingly, many of these women say they have never been asked on a date. Their voices are part of a rising chorus expressing concern about the falling fortunes of our boys and men. Does this video do anything?
Boyfriends hooked on pornography.
Okay, that's just the transcription of the video. Um, and it was kind of a response also to this post where he said, I think he wrote a story about this, and it says, why are so many boys and men floundering? Our culture has failed to offer a clear and compelling models of masculinity at which young men can build their lives. These men are not measuring up, in part because they've never been given nothing to aim for as men. And there's a new book from Scott Galloway out called Notes on Being a Man. Protect, provide, procreate, um, and and this has obviously been a sort of uh, hot topic for a while, and Scott Galloway has become a big voice in kind of what's going on with men. I do see I do see this one post that says Scott Galloway is the safest edgelord in America. The manosphere's sharpest advice wrapped in sun and love bubble wrap, and it's making him richer than almost anyone else in the space. Also true. And it's um and he does a whole takedown of Galloway on that sort of thing, but it is uh it is an interesting an interesting dynamic, and especially if we go back to the original post and video from Brad Wilcox of all people, in the family studies, this idea that men are just not keeping up, and it's kind of funny because I was just on doing a podcast with the journalist David Beckemeyer, and we were talking about my new book, America's Lost Generation, out now, and it's up here. I put it away because I did finish the appearance, but here we are, America's Lost Generation, out now. Um, and we were talking about, and I was talking, we were talking about all this, and I said, there's so much downstream of economics. There's so much downstream of when there are not jobs, when there are not, not just enough money to take care of yourself, but enough money to buy a home one day, to be able to afford a family, to be able to afford, the ability to date, all this type of thing. There are stories, and there's one story in the book of a guy being like, I can't afford to go out and date. You got to pay for the dinner and drinks and gifts and all this type of thing. It's like, I don't have that kind of money. I can't afford it, sort of thing. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, that's not what our grandparents did. Well, okay. My great grandmother found a guy in Pennsylvania during the Depression who said, marry me for my back pay because he worked for a ditch digging company. Well, it's not 1929 or 1930, sort of thing. Um, so, that's maybe not a great metric to go by. And especially in a day and age where women are economically independent, there's no reason for her to go after a guy that doesn't have money. Like, she has her own. And we're not so advanced that women are the one doing the asking and the paying and all this type of thing. There's still some expectations for men to bring something to the table. And that's kind of what this original post from Brad Wilcox is about. And I just found it interesting that, women are kind of like, well, where are the men? Where they checked out? Why are we not getting all this type of thing? And there's a lot of potential answers to that question, but I think a lot of it is economic. And when I was studying the hikikomori in Japan, and also NEETs, not in education, employment or training, which is a fancy word to describe those people who don't are not engaging in those opportunities. um, the economic picture becomes quite stark, and you're like, oh, with a different economy this would be different, wouldn't it? Yeah, it would. And we have this economy now where a lot of the good stable employment is not necessarily flowing to men, especially in an economy where knowledge work is happening, all this sort of thing. I have a story about AI later on that's going to be even more frightening. But I think, for a lot of men, it's quite frankly, there's no real incentive to go out and do those things, and no idea that it will pay off. You can put in a lot of effort and get nowhere. So would you rather be in a sad studio or in a roommate situation, barely surviving, all this type of thing, or would it just be faster, easier to stay in your parents' basement? You know, as far as the hooked on pornography aspect of things, it's everywhere and has been for some time. I'm not saying that's a healthy thing. That's just part of the conversation. And male peers that don't pull their weight in group projects, that's normal. They can complain less about that. But I think women are expecting men to be like them, and that's not what men will do. And I think that's partly caused this new kind of weird dynamic where guys are just checking out. And some of these replies are very, very interesting. It says a big part. One of this one reply says a big part of this isn't that men suddenly fell apart. Is that we spent 20 years building a culture that told boys they were optional, defective, or dangerous unless tightly supervised. We removed every clear expectation for how to become a man. We mocked masculinity, pathologized male desire, erased male-only spaces, and medicated restless boys and told them the future belonged to empowered girls. Now everyone is shocked that many young men have no direction, no confidence, and no hope. I think there's an argument for that. Um, and this one I think is quite good. It says, I really do think many men, especially young men, are adapting poorly to modern technology, and this is why we're seeing such a drastic change in them. Physical work is essential for the male body, but not as essential for the female body, which explains why it's hitting them harder. So when the majority of men are no longer doing the types of physical work that men did previously, their muscles are atrophying and their testosterone is dropping, and dropping out are side effects of that. Blaming ideology or women is only making it worse and making women angry and distressed. Also true. We need to focus on men, not their relationship to women, but their relationship to themselves and their own bodies. Doing physical work is not oppression. Working in masculine fields like construction or law enforcement is not low status. It's simply a part of being male, which I think is interesting. There's only one problem. Neither of those tend to, well, law enforcement can pay pretty good. Construction, it really depends. That's a very, narrow view. Um, and there's a whole discussion about that we're not going to get into. But it's very interesting, interesting discussion, and that kind of gets into the next news story from Compact Magazine, The Lost Generation with Jacob Savage. This is long, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because we don't have that kind of time. But I want to kind of grab some pull quotes. And so here it kind of in here it says that nothing explains the new media story quite like Vox, whose explainers dominated 2010's discourse and whose internal demographics capture the decade's professional shift. This being a story about how, when it comes to cultural institutions, white males have been shut out for the last decade, is what's going on. And it gives some figures here. The New York Times newsroom has gone from 57% male and 78% white in 2015 to 46% male and 66% white in 2024. Condé Nast Today, which is a big magazine conglomerate, they own Vogue, today is just 35% male and 60% white. BuzzFeed, a media operation that had been 52% male and 75% white in 2014, was just 36% male and 52% white by 2023. But nothing explains the new media story quite like Vox, whose explainers dominated 2010's discourse and whose internal demographics capture the decade's professional shift. Back in 2013, when Ezra Klein came under fire for his startup's lack of diversity, Vox Media was 82% male and 88% white. By 2022, the company was just 37% male and 59% white. And by 2025, leadership was 73% female. The demographic shift reshaped not only who told the stories, but which stories got told. After George Floyd's death, Andrew's colleague Lucas was assigned a piece about why you should never call the police. Quote, I remember having to interview one of these abolitionists for a story about how if somebody breaks into your car at your home, it's white supremacy to call the cops, even if you need it for an insurance report, unquote, Lucas told me. That always made me feel gross. I think I look back on that with a lot of regret. Newsrooms were center left places in 2005, the prominent Gen X reporter told me. Now they're incredibly left places. I imagine one reason newsrooms have gotten more explicitly lefty is that you have white guys and white women adopting a kind of protective coloration allyship mindset to get through the door. Andrew, for his part, wasn't able to adopt the performative allyship that had become expected. Quote, I always thought I was an effeminate nerd growing up, but my way of expressing myself now puts me on the most masculine end of men in media, he told me. I started to pick up on the fact that there wasn't much room for people who even speak in my timbre. He was recruited for a senior reporter position at a more prestigious outlet, jumping through hoops every step of the way, as he told me. But by the end, it felt like a cruel joke. Extensive interviews, writing tests, endless meetings with various editors, only to find out months later that the job had gone to someone a decade younger than him, a gay man of color who'd managed to go from intern to assistant editor to senior reporter in less than 2 years. If you're a white man, you gotta be a superstar, Andrew told me. You can't help feeling like no matter how good you are, you're born in the wrong year. As he saw it, the industry had its super successful white guys who'd made it before 2014, and so were functionally Gen X. But for everyone else, moving up in a contracting industry was nearly impossible. I was kind of grandfathered in during one era and achieved a level going into 2015 2024, where it just really didn't affect me, one of these superstar journalists told me. After surviving years of buyouts, Andrew finally made senior reporter in 2023, but it felt less like recognition and more like a consolation prize. He was coming up on 40, unmarried, and with little room for forward or lateral movement. When the next round of buyouts hit, he decided it was time to leave. And the end, kind of down here, where it talks about, all the changes and all the sort of, new different way of people being hired in these industries for TV, and it gets into the story about a writer's room and all this type of thing. There's a line down here that was very interesting. This one, the white men shut out of the culture industries didn't surge into other high status fields, which I thought was very interesting. The refugees that young men did find, crypto, podcasting, Substack, were refugees precisely because institutional barriers to entry didn't exist. A friend who's now an executive at a major crypto company scraped by as a freelance film editor for years. He applied to Netflix 5 times. Eventually, he was told explicitly they didn't need more white guys. He didn't go into crypto because it was high status. Hollywood, the high status industry, wouldn't have him. Um, And right down here at the bottom, after this, they visit this writer's room, and it says here, um, here we go. Those women didn't take our jobs any more than the 50-year-old Hollywood lifers had. The lifers were still there. They're still there. And I'm not angry at the women and people of color who made it instead of me. People have the right, in most cases, the responsibility to take the opportunities that are offered them, or even at the older white guys who ensured that I didn't. Mostly, I'm annoyed at myself because instead of settling down, proposing to my then girlfriend, now wife, and earning a steady income that might support a family, I spent a decade insisting the world treat me fairly when the world was loudly telling me it had no intention of doing so. I could see what was happening. I was being told point blank what was happening, and still I thought I'd be the exception. That if I wrote one more script, took one more meeting, I'd slip through. But very few people get to be the exception. It's strange and a little more than a little poisonous to see yourself buffeted by forces beyond your control. But there's also a comfort in it. Because it's less painful to scroll through other people's IMDb pages late at night figuring out what shortcut race gender connections they took to success than to grapple with the fact that there are white men my age who've succeeded, and I am not one of them. I could have worked harder, I could have networked better, I could have even been better. The truth is, I'm not some extraordinary talent who was passed over. I'm an ordinary talent, and in ordinary times that would have been enough. I'm going to read that one more time. The truth is, I'm not some extraordinary talent who was passed over. I'm an ordinary talent, and in ordinary times that would have been enough. There's a wounded pride here, how could there not be? I have two sons. I used to imagine long before they were born that I would take them to film sets, that I'd bring them along to exotic locations. Instead, their father spends most of his working day in his bedroom, scrolling through spreadsheets and ticket listings. He sells tickets professionally. What do I say when my boys ask about my old hopes and dreams? What do I tell them when they ask about theirs? Jacob Savage writes from Los Angeles. When I read this morning, I had a lot of thoughts. Um, this milieu of men being shut out, and in this case specifically white men. He and I are very close in age. I think he's maybe a little older than I am. I identify with a lot of this, and I'm the person who was shutting him out of these jobs, and oh, we need more, people of color, and we need more women, and all this type of thing. I'm kind of like, I'm a man and biracial, and I was shut out too. No one was. That's why I sit here talking to everybody here. Um, I had to go direct to the people because I was not getting a job anywhere. Um, I have felt a lot of what he talks about. I encourage everyone to go read this at Compact Mag. I've felt this a lot. Maybe not necessarily that I was in an industry where white men were not required, sort of thing. That wasn't, necessarily my lane. But these feelings that, you know, I'm not some extraordinary talent who was passed over. I'm an ordinary talent, and in ordinary times that would have been enough. That line is so emblematic of today's economy. It's either or. You're a superstar or you're not in the conversation. And if there's kind of one thing that I think really defines the modern economy, particularly in cultural institutions, it's that. Like that whole idea of you're either a superstar or you're not there um is really tough. AI will make it worse. We'll hold that thought. We're gonna get back to that. Um, and there used to be, especially in writing and magazines, there was a class of middle class jobs. You weren't famous, but you could make a nice salary writing some stories, all this type of thing. Film used to be full of this. People whose names you didn't know, but who made great middle class incomes, lived fabulous lives working in the film industry as a grip, as an electrician, as a PA, as a producer, all this type of thing. Wonderful things, all this sort of thing. And a lot of that stuff, the jobs for the ordinary talent that used to be good enough have rapidly disappeared. And he mentions, like, this is a shrinking, and these industries are shrinking. They're not what they used to be. Um and the fact that, he's like, yeah, I've been sidelined, sort of thing, and a lot of other people have been sidelined, and all these people have been let go, and people left the industry, and What place do we have? This whole thing is emblematic of, we started with Brad Wilcox and then to this. The whole point of this is, what are we going to do with the ordinary talents? What are we going to do with the people who are just good enough for ordinary times? And no one has an answer at all. And I was talking with this David Beckemeyer, the old system where you could be a nice kid from California and have a career as a journalist. The institutions and pipelines that made that possible are no longer there. And again, I read through this and I'm kind of like, I could have written this. Not as elegantly, probably. I could have written this. And I get, it's like, when my boys ask about my old hopes and dreams, what do I tell them about what I told about theirs? I had a friend recently tell me kind of like, oh, my son sells Pokemon cards, and I'm trying to convince him he needs to go to college and not just sell Pokemon cards. And I said, very sadly, he's made the best economic decision of his age. He's like 15. I'm like, he's made a great economic decision. He'll probably make more money than he would by going to college. That's not good, everyone. Like, how many are here? 11 people. We're having a good night tonight. That's not good, everybody. This isn't good. Bad, 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 bad. Like, this is not good. And obviously this article is attacking DEI and and the white men getting all this type of thing, and the decline in white men, and that point is incredibly well taken. That's all great and everything, but the reality is that this is a peak into a much bigger problem. And most of his working day in his bedroom, scrolling through spreadsheets and ticket listings. That's a very sad state of America. Very, very sad state of America. Very, very sad state of our economy. Very, very sad state of policy that a really creative, great person who probably could have really developed and done something is reselling concert tickets and supports a family off of that. And a lot of older people would say, well, you did what you had to do. You tried. It's Tinseltown. Dreams don't work out, but you found something. You work from home, all this type of thing, blah, blah, blah. That's cool. That's all fine and well. There's no retirement in that, by the way. I probably gets healthcare from his wife. This is a man who's been left behind. Okay? There are millions, as we've just been talking about with the first post. Millions like this. This is a crisis. And the fact that we're not talking about it that way only makes it worse. Anyway, let's move on. What do we have next? Oh, this is the original tweet about that. We don't need to read all that. We've talked about this quite enough. I do want to touch on the national security story that I originally wrote about in the newsletter this weekend. This new report that came out about military readiness, and there's a new reset about national security that the Trump administration released, a 3-page report. Lots of interesting developments in this front. This is very interesting. And so I loved this post because it articulated it very well. I referenced it in the Saturday newsletter, which you would have read if you'd subscribed, CameronJournal.substack.com. It says here, the 2025 national security strategy dazzles with patriotic spectacle, but the real revelation is quieter. Washington has begun admitting, first to itself, then to the world, that the architecture of its empire exceeds the strength of its foundations. Not in those words, of course. Empires never confess in plain language, but the subtext is unmistakable. A superpower that once claimed every horizon now admits between the lines that the horizons have outrun it. The doctrine that guided Washington for more than 3 decades, global reach without global limits, has evaporated. Not renounced, not debated, simply gone, like a magician's dove that never returns to the stage. The Beltway once treated full-spectrum dominance as a law of nature, America would command land, sea, air, space, cyberspace, and any domain human imagination not yet dreamt up. It wasn't strategy, it was posture, a chest permanently puffed, a myth of inexhaustible strength of exceptionalism. But this NSS keeps repeating a word that was once taboo in Washington: prioritize. A euphemism, yes, but a revealing one. When a hegemon tells the world it must prioritize, it is really whispering, our reach no longer matches our appetite. There's an even quieter admission tucked inside the prose that Washington no longer believes it can dominate the world, so it aims instead to choreograph it, shaping the arcs of allies, rivals, and regions from behind the curtain, using pressure points instead of occupying armies. This is not humility, it's adaptation. And if the US is shrinking its global pretensions, it's because the empire now confronts its most uncomfortable mirror, the battlefield of Ukraine. Washington, prior to Trump, expected sanctions to shatter Russia. Instead, they shattered Europe. It's expected the Russian economy to collapse. Instead, Moscow reindustrialized at a pace the West cannot match. It expected Ukraine to be a permanent lever against Eurasia. Instead, it became a black hole for NATO's credibility, exposing an alliance that can talk in mighty empty threats but produce shells by the thimbleful. The NSS does not say this, but the pivot is built on it. America discovered it can no longer afford a proxy war that burns through armaments faster than its factories, finances, and fractured politics can sustain, and discovered that its alliance system, protection racket, fractures under real strain. And so the Empire Light revises its methods. It rebrands the confrontation it cannot sustain kinetically into a cheaper, continuous flow of hybrid operations: cyber intrusions, political fragmentation, elite targeting, economic asphyxiation, and covert destabilization. The NSS doesn't advertise this, but the structure is obvious. When a superpower can no longer deploy divisions everywhere, it deploys algorithms, sanctions, and proxies instead. Containment becomes choreography. Coercion becomes a low cost subscription model. The exhausted superpower realizes it's now a great power needing to pivot. This is where Divide and Rule 2.0 surfaces. The NASS offers selective engagement to Moscow, economic openings, regulatory relief, cooperation veneers, not because Washington suddenly discovered reciprocity, but because it wants to pry Russia from China's gravitational embrace. A carrot wrapped in a stick. A whisper, wrapped in implicit threat: come back to our markets and we'll help you forget the last decade. Refuse, and we'll turn every ethnic, digital, and financial fault line against you. Moscow, of course, won't fall for it, but the attempt reveals how profoundly the imperial toolkit has changed. And he goes on a little bit about allies and all this sort of thing, but this one is quite interesting. It says, when Washington cannot dominate the world, it asserts dominance in its hemisphere. That is the logic of every empire in retreat. The shrinking circle becomes sacred, and the fist tightens inside it. The NASS reflects that instinct, not in its manifesto of a confident superpower. It is a strategy. It is a strategic diary of a power choosing which rooms of the imperial mansion it can still afford to heat and which wings it will quietly abandon to the cold. If this document signals the end of full spectrum dominance, it does not guarantee the emergence of a peaceful multipolar equilibrium. Empires rarely step aside gracefully. They consolidate, they lash out, they test boundaries, and they cling to the remnants of what they once commanded. So while Washington publicly speaks of restraint, the machinery underneath, the globalists, neocon hawks, the lobbies, the contractors, the permanent security class, prepares for the next justification, the next theater, the next emergency that will require American leadership. The decisive question is no longer whether the United States can run the world. The answer has arrived in writing. The real question is whether the United States can live in a world it no longer runs, and whether it can resist the imperial reflex to break what it cannot control. Because in the end, the NSS is not really a strategy. It is the first draft of an empire learning the boundaries of a new century, a work in progress like any draft. And if Washington cannot accept these boundaries, the imperial mansion will not simply shrink. The world will start locking doors it once walked through as owner and invite it back only as a guest. This is something that I always knew was going to happen at some point. Is this next one relevant? No. And I thought we had more time. I knew the multipolar world was coming. I knew that this whole thing would eventually come crashing down when I was in grad school in 2009 to 2011, all this sort of thing. What I didn't think is it would happen so soon. Um, the timeline's a little bit premature to what I thought it was going to be. But this is a very interesting, and I talked about this at the news. I said there's all these different things coming together to where really the United States is going to be in retreat, which gets us into why so many things are happening in South America, and how Trump is really getting into the Monroe Doctrine stuff. Um, is because of this new dynamic coming from the national security strategy of the United States, and it's very Britain after World War One. Less so Britain after World War Two, but it means the party's coming to an end. It's not quite over, but the party is coming to an end, and I don't know that we will step aside as nicely as the British did. I don't know that it's who we are. I do agree with that, but I did know this was going to happen. I'm surprised it's happening in the 2020s. I thought maybe the 2040s, but I'm surprising it's happening. It's happened now. I also think there's a great hunger among people to kind of take care of the home front. I mean, we were in these long wars for 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, and those have only just recently concluded in the last several years. And now I think people are kind of like, look around. The sidewalks are broken, the bridges are falling apart, the interstates are no good, we need trains, we need all these sorts of things. What is all this global commitment buying us? That was the USAID discussion. What is all of this really buying us? What are we really getting out of all of this? And a lot of people would say not much. Um, and I mean, it benefits a few people, but not much. And until the recent tariff wars, the U.S. was the beating heart of the global economy. And with the new trade barriers, that's no longer going to be true. The world is shifting under our feet. Are we ready for that? Probably not. It'll be interesting to see how this develops. I think I think the multipolar world is here, basically. It's in its early stages, but it's here. How we handle it, how other countries handle it, um is going to be interesting. I think we will definitely, there'll kind of be probably a big leveling with other nations, other parts of the world, how we do business. This means lifestyles will change, wealth will change, the type of social supports we need will change, the way we issue debt, what we do with our currency, all this sort of stuff will need to adjust to the new reality. Um, Everything else follows on from the military strength, and the idea that all of this is kind of shifting under our feet. Um, it will be very interesting to see where we are at the end of Trump 2.0 in 2028 and see how the next administration handles it, because I think that's when it becomes real. I think towards as this decade comes to a close, as we crest into the 2030s, what I've just read and what will really become real, and that's only 5 years from now. So really 4 years, because we're almost to 2026. 4 years from now, as we get to into 2030. As someone who was alive for the tail end of the American High, and as someone who got to live through Pax Americana in the 90s, the emotional feeling of diminishment is real. The fact that I knew it was coming does not make it hurt any less. And it's a sad moment, but an important one. How we manage this, how we act, how we adjust to this new reality will define this country for probably the next 50 years. It'll be very important. But there'll be a lot of changes that will affect our everyday lives. From the price of things, the jobs available, the cultural cachet, ability to travel, all this type of thing. It will all be changing in profound ways that we don't yet understand. And we haven't even talked about AI yet. All right. Let's go to the next story, which is going to be about, if the economy is so good, why is everyone complaining? And this is an interesting so this is an interesting sort of video. Well, let's just watch.
Hey, real quick, if you're a liberal, a Democrat, if you just dislike Trump, stick around. I got some serious questions for y'all. Now, obviously, the price of everything is going down, and it's amazing. 401ks are booming, investments are booming, people are making fucking money. So my question to all of you people that hate Trump, why? Now I get it. There's some shit that motherfucker has done that I dislike. But currently America's doing better. Everything is thriving. A lot better than the last administration. The last administration, I couldn't even afford to survive. I was starving, freezing. I didn't know how I was going to pay my bills. But since Trump and his administration took over, shit has gotten significantly better. My bills are paid till 2027. This car is paid off 4 years early. I got money in the bank. I can help other fucking people. I couldn't do that before. Now I understand your party, your media is built on misinformation and division. But I promise you, if you turn off the news and just look around and live your life, you will see that it got significantly better. So again, let me know in the comments why you dislike him. I understand majority of you dislike him because you're told to. It's part of that whole cult-like vote blue no matter who mentality. So again, let me know in the comments section, because you definitely sat back and watched Joe and his hoe destroy this country and you said nothing. But now you have everything in the world to say. It's the hypocrisy and the ignorance for me. So again, I don't agree with everything Trump has done, but he's absolutely better for America. I love all of you. Let me know in the comment section. I'm your Huckleberry.
Well, congratulations. We've met the median American voter. Always a good thing. Um, and
Hey, real quick, if
the
you're a
top
liberal, a Dem-
the top comment is definitely indicative of the MAGA opinion on this topic, because they can't see through their own hatred and they're stupid. And this comment definitely is indicative. The first thing I ask for when everyone says this, I'm kind of like, good for who? Whom? Whom is doing so well? Um, Especially when every economic indicator is not doing well. Um, the you know, the you know, the stock market being up only helps a handful of people. Most Americans don't own stocks. Um, when it comes to employment, we don't even have employment numbers from last month. Um, but ask anybody how tough the job market is, and everyone will tell you how tough the job market is. The reality is the cost of tariffs are starting to get passed on to consumers, and that all the tariff revenue that Trump talks about is literally comes from our pockets, because we're paying higher prices because something was imported and it was taxed when it was imported. And over a product like trucks and things, it adds up, because the metal was taxed, the paint was taxed, the rubber in the hoses was taxed, and then the hose was taxed, and on and on and on and on and on. And so when to answer this question, why all of you who hate Trump, why? Sir, your experience is not indicative of most people. That would be the answer to your question. I'm glad that your situation has improved. I'm always happy when anyone has money in the bank and can pay off their car and all this type of thing. But this is not the experience of a lot of people, and that's where the anger is coming from. It's not purely just because of, well, Trump did it, so we're going to be unhappy about it. I'm sure there are people in that boat. We could find those people. But there's a lot of us out here who it's not better. And for some people, one could argue it's a bit worse, given, tariffs and all this type of things. Some businesses have had to close. So it's, even someone that listed layoffs, all the layoffs, thousands of people, all this sort of thing. It's a very difficult, difficult thing. And this person, says it really well. Note the select 401k is booming. Yes, that's the point. The rich are getting richer, but this will not trickle down. Please keep on ignoring reality and we put you so. The other thing I also kind of wanted to mention about this clip, which is really the reason why I clipped it, is this is also indicative of the K-shaped economy that we've had coming out of the pandemic, where you have a small slice doing very well and a larger slice doing worse. Obviously he's in the upper slice, which is wonderful for him. Love that for him. But there's also still a lot of people struggling. That, and I mean, it's also hard to judge the Biden administration today. They only had a world-shattering pandemic whose recovery didn't even begin till 2023. And I'm not saying the Biden economy was that great. I was on this show saying Bidenomics, not good, economy is not good, inflation is terrible, people are suffering, all this type of thing. Um, Again, I'm glad he's doing well, but that's just not the experience of a lot of people. And there's been a lot of layoffs, and even just the precarity of layoffs. And we haven't even talked about AI yet. So it's not that, everyone's just anti-Trump. It's that for a lot of people, things haven't improved. Simple as. It's not too complicated. Um, this We're getting to the top of the hour, so I'm probably going to save this one for next week. Let's dash down to AI. Um, yeah, the EU blowing apart, we can skip that. Actually, let's do this guy first. Actually, before we get into, we'll save boomer luxury communism for next week, and we'll finish on AI taking your job. But let's watch this guy first. I'm just gonna play this. Beware of the sensitive language, will be what I tell you.
Homosexuality is degenerate. It is bad for the populace. It's bad for society. It's been incredibly harmful. We've seen a full court press against our own children as the sacrificial lamb in order to appease older gay men and make them feel better about themselves. It's wicked. It's predatory. And I think, yeah, it is appropriate for us to be able to call it what it is and say, wait a second, this is perverse, it's wicked, it's faggotry, and it needs to stop. I think that that's okay. Yes, you can use that word on occasion, as I just did, to say, no, we're not going to tolerate faggotry with our children. Cut it out. Stop it. Say Christ is Lord. Stop it. I do think that we can use some strong language. Homosexuality is degenerate. It is bad for...
Submitted without comment? No, I'll comment. It's 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 not surprising when a Christian nationalist wants to come. I mean, LGBTQ stuff is the first defensive line on the liberal progressive project. Let me change this graphic real fast. Let's put it as a question. Should Christians use AGGOT as a slur? That'll be provocative. That'll catch someone's eye. This is not surprising coming from Joel Webbon. He's a Christian nationalist. In the march of Christian nationalism and in the rollback of social rights earned over the last several years, LGBTQ rights are always the first defensive line. And the rhetoric he's using here tells you why. It's viewed as disgusting, perverse, degenerate, predatory. This was the attitude until about 20 years ago. This is what a lot of people have fought and a few people have died for to stop. Even before race, they'll go after LGBTQ. The only reason I kind of bring this up is because Christian nationalism never gets the attention that it really deserves. It is a subject I've written about extensively. I work with Mikey Weinstein over at the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. He is the loudest voice talking about Christian nationalism in the U.S. military and in society more broadly, and he and I have done a lot of interviews and a lot of articles, everything together. So I'm not surprised about any of this. I grew up with this. It's fine. But these people are always going to go after the LGBTQ community first because it is the easiest thing to attack. It is extremely vulnerable and extremely precarious. This is where a lot of the dialogue has been having over trans rights really hurts the rest of the letters in that alphabet, because the trans stuff gives people a cover to go out in public and talk like this. That's I think kind of the frightening part, is that what's happened with trans rights has given him the liberty to come along and say this sort of thing. Not that he doesn't have a right to say it. We live in a country with free speech. Of course he has a right to say it. I have a right to criticize it. That's what keeps me in business. We have fun here. But the fight is always going to start here. The fight to maintain rights as people is always going to start here. And it's something that I always continue to feel that I need to have a very loud voice for, because there's people in different positions that are more vulnerable that can't always necessarily speak out about those things, especially as someone who dates women, will probably get married to a woman, but does enjoy the company of men. I feel like an even bigger responsibility to be kind of like, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Webbon, you don't get to do that. You don't get to, you can restrict whoever's around your children that you want to, but you don't get to say I don't get to exist in society. If you want to keep your children cloistered away from all of that in your church, in your community, whatever have you, God bless you. Please do so. That's fine. If you want to keep your children from being exposed to this sort of thing, that's your right as a parent to do so, and I will never complain. But to say that I just don't get to exist in society, or that, we're predatory, we're evil, all this sort of thing, that we have to be hidden away like some shameful thing, that I'm not going to sit around for very long. You can do whatever you need to do in your own private home, family, whatever have you, but the rest of us still get to live and work and exist in society. You don't have to like us, don't have to talk to us, don't have to associate with us. That's all fine and well. That's your right not to do so. You can spend every Sunday talking about how awful and terrible we are. We have free speech. It's your right to do so. And go right on ahead. I'll keep talking about you. But we also live in a country together as well. And that's also really important too. So that's that. Let's finish on AI. Preferably on the face. It says here, a Yale economist just published a paper that should terrify every knowledge worker. Oh, let me change the graphic. I just started doing these graphics the other day, and I'm trying to be more fancy, and more sophisticated. AI and your job. Let's start with that. That sounds fun. And so we'll do that, and maybe we'll even make it a little bit a little bit bigger. We'll move that there, and we'll even maybe go up a couple sizes. There we go. Oh, good. That looks perfect. So it says here, a Yale economist just published a paper that should terrify every knowledge worker. It's not about AI taking your job. No. It's about AI making your job economically worthless while the economy booms. Let me explain the nightmare scenario. The paper We Won't Be Missed starts with two simple premises. 1. AGI arrives, AI that can do any economically valuable task. 2. Compute becomes abundant, keeps getting cheaper like Moore's Law. From these two assumptions, the whole economic order collapses. Here's the key insight most people miss. The paper divides all work into two categories. Bottleneck work, essential for growth, energy, logistics, R&D. Accessory work, nice to have, arts, hospitality, therapy. This distinction changes everything. Proposition 1 proves something shocking. AGI will automate all bottleneck work. Not because humans are bad at it, because sustained growth requires it. The economy literally cannot afford to have critical functions limited by fixed human labor supply. So what happens to economic output? Propositions 2 and 3, output becomes a linear function of compute. Growth rate equals compute growth rate. The entire economy's expansion is now tied to one thing: how fast we can scale computational resources. Human labor? Irrelevant. But surely humans will still get paid well for the work we do? Nope. Proposition 4 is brutal. Your wage converges to the cost of the compute needed to replicate your work. Not your skill, not your experience, just how much would the AI version cost. Think about that for a second. As compute gets exponentially cheaper, the ceiling on your wage falls. A surgeon's salary isn't set by years of training anymore. It's set by what does it cost to run the AI that can do the same surgery. Replicatable equals cheap. This leads to the paper's most devastating conclusion. Proposition 5, labor's share of GDP converges to zero. Not because we're unemployed, because wages are capped while GDP grows infinitely with compute. We become economically invisible. So who gets all the money? Answer, the owners of compute. All wealth flows to whoever controls the computational resources. It's like the transition from feudalism, land equals wealth, to capitalism, capital equals wealth. Except now, compute equals wealth. The paper extends this to science itself. Proposition 9 through 11, AGI can automate scientific discovery. This creates compounded growth faster than before, but not a singularity. Growth is still limited by how fast we can scale compute. Progress, but not infinite. The title, We Won't Be Missed, isn't about job loss. It's about economic irrelevance. The paper proves if tomorrow half the population stopped working, no one would notice. Growth continues, living standards rise, just without us mattering. This isn't sci-fi speculation, it's formal economic modeling with propositions and proofs. The questions it raises: how do we distribute wealth in a zero labor share economy? What is work for, if not economic value? Who should own the compute? We need answers fast. And he goes on to, you know, talk about the rebuttal and why do we assume the future will be decided by a calculator, all this type of thing. I don't want to necessarily read that because we're over time. But I was very interested in this work, in the title of the paper is Work We Won't Be Missed, Work and Growth in the Area of AGI. I think this is very interesting. I think this is farther off than he wants to believe. We're not anywhere near AGI. I think once AI gets big enough, this is plausible, which is quite frightening for everyone. Pretty soon you won't want to watch me for the news. There'll be a nice man AI here who'll be telling you all about it. And it will probably be more entertaining than I am. And that'll be the Cameron Journal out. I'll have just an AI of me with the same brand sort of thing. But in the rebuttal, it comes down here and says, why? Because think about it, if pure economic logic were sovereign, child labor would still be common. It's cheap. Monopolies would run everything, maximum efficiency, but they don't. We have minimum wages, we have antitrust laws, we have weekends. Once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. Every time the market tries to maximize profit at the expense of human dignity, a bigger force steps in. Politics, culture, ethics. The economy is an engine, but society builds the guardrails. And then it kind of ends where it says the economy doesn't exist in a vacuum, it lives in a society. We decide the value of human connection, we decide the rules of fairness, we decide what's for sale and what isn't. The calculator doesn't get the final vote, we do. And so it's yeah, it's a difficult thing. I think this is plausible, and this person brings up the same flaws I do. AGI is not close. LLMs are nothing like AGI. AGI without proper interaction with the real world, great, well, and maintained with sensors and actuators is screen only. If no one has any money, no one can buy the service, so the companies have no money. I think this is a very interesting thing, and I think what's kind of fascinating is the idea of of how much does it cost to replace your job is going to hit white collar jobs like a ton of bricks. The LLMs have a long way to go in that aspect, but it's not never. It's we could get there sort of thing. I just wanted to put this out there as a thought and an idea because I thought it was an interesting thing. And the abstract says, as computational resources expand, the economy automates all bottleneck work, some accessory work can be left untouched by AI and assigned exclusively to humans. Output becomes linear in compute and labor. Its growth is driven by the expansion of the compute. Wages converge to the opportunity cost of computational resources required to reproduce human work. The share of labor income in GDP converges to zero. I think there is a potential future not too distant from now where you end up with computational AI downward pressure on wages. That, I think, is quite viable. And I think the idea that, every knowledge worker should be quite afraid of this, it's going to certainly hit knowledge workers sooner than everyone else. And that's going to cause quite a bit of an upheaval, both economically and possibly politically as well. Especially as the layoffs hit, and we have a tight and smaller economy in an age when our country is in retreat and the empire is beginning to show its first signs of decline. All of this is happening at once. So if you want to know if things are going to get easier, better, back to normal, all this type of thing, I'm going to end the news hour with this thought. Nope. No. This is the new normal. This is what we're doing now. And that that makes things quite difficult. I think back to that article with that guy what from Compact Magazine. What do I tell my sons about my dreams and their future? I don't think we have the answer for that anymore. So, yeah. Anyway, it's tough. I'm exhausted. It's cold here in New England. It's 24 degrees outside. It snowed. I want to be under a blanket all day, so I'm going to go get under a blanket. Thank you all so much for coming. All 11 of you. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Newshour. Catch me on Twitter, LinkedIn, at Cameron Cowan, at Cameron Journal on TikTok, and at Cameron Cowan on Instagram. And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. It'll come out on Saturday. And have a really great week, everyone. I'll see you next Monday. And happy holidays, second to last show of the year. Happy holidays to everyone. And condolences to the victims of Brown University and to Rob Reiner's family. Our heart goes out to you. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for watching. I love you forever. Thank you so much. Bye bye.